Customer service, done right, can be your company's single biggest competitive advantage. Welcome to the Customer Service Revolution. Join customer service authority and best-selling author John DiJulius as he interviews leaders who are revolutionizing their industries. This is more than a podcast, though. It's a movement. The Customer Service Revolution is a radical overthrow of conventional business mentality designed to transform what customers and employees experience. If you are a revolutionary customer service leader who's ready to stop competing on price and obsessed with building a brand that people cannot live without, this podcast is for you.
Welcome, revolutionaries, to another episode of the Customer Service Revolution podcast. I am John DiJulius, Chief Revolution Officer of the DiJulius Group. And today I have the pleasure of interviewing a longtime mentor, not directly, but someone I've looked up to and have followed for practically my entire speaking and consulting career. Joseph Pine II, an internationally acclaimed author, speaker, and management advisor. He is the co-founder of Strategic Horizons, helping businesses conceive and design new ways of adding value to their economic offerings. Joe's latest book, The Transformation Economy, Guiding Customers to Achieve Their Aspirations, which shows the greatest economic value lies in helping customers become who they want to be. Thinkers 50 named it one of the top 10 best new management books of 2026. Welcome, Joe.
Thanks, John. It's a pleasure to be on you with all your other revolutionaries.
Yeah, I'm really excited. So, let's start with, I think, how, to me, I got to know you and your original published book, The Experience Economy, back in 1999. That was such, and still is, I feel like it could come out today and be earth shattering for so many people. Let me ask you something. Joe, was that book too early? It was, to me, it's still a novel idea. What was it? Was it the right timing in 1999 because you were so ahead of time?
We obviously were ahead of time, but I still think it was the right time because it helped usher in the true experience economy. It's sort of the thing that once you see it, you can't unsee it. So even back then, once I discovered the idea and came up with it, I could see it all around, right? And what was going on. But today, 27 years later, it's just exploded in terms of so many new genres experience, so many retailers getting experience, restaurants, manufacturers, hotels, hospitality. It's all over the place now.
I remember, reading it and, just my head was spinning, and it was, early in my entrepreneur career. My first business that we still have is a chain of upscale salons and spas. So it's perfect for that. But I remember, just like you said, you can't unsee it. So I'm reading it, or had just recently read it. And I went to Cooperstown with my sons to visit the Hall of Fame. And immediately as I'm driving around it, I'm like, they got this all wrong. Instead of Main Street to 4th, turn right, it should be Mantle to Ruth, then turn left on Gehrig. And that was what it did. It just made everything, themed and an experience. And it was just, still today is revolutionary.
I'm a diehard New York Yankees fan, so I would definitely vote for those.
Yeah, I guess I just gave you, 3 Yankees,
That's
which, yeah. So, all right. So, today, you just came out with not today, but recently, The Transformation Economy, Guiding Customers to Achieve Their Aspirations, which shows the greatest economic values lies in helping customers become who they want to be. That is just a unusually thought-provoking tagline. So tell us, what's the difference between the experience economy and the transformation economy?
Well, it is the transformations are the fifth and final economic offering, right? Beyond commodities, goods, services, and experiences, right? Then transformations. Transformations are transformative experiences. We only ever change through our experiences. We're all the product of our experiences, as the saying goes. And increasingly, we desire help in achieving our aspirations because change is hard. You think about quitting smoking or losing weight and so many other things. And so transformations are a distinct economic offering, just like the other four of them. We use experiences as the raw material to guide people to change, again, to become who they want to be. Think of them as effectual outcomes that change individuals in a lasting way, right? That's my definition of a transformation.
And in say fact, that again?
Effectual outcomes that change individuals in a lasting way.
Okay.
Right? And it doesn't have to be huge changes. It can just be things like make me a better golfer or turn me into a gardener and things like that. But there are also very big core identity changes that we look for help with as well. And in fact, I discovered transformations at the same time I did experiences in the mid 1990s before writing that book.
Yeah, so you wrote about it in the experience economy.
Right. And the last 2 chapters are about transformations. And in some industries, I think of the first 8 chapters as a Trojan horse to get you to read it. But there, I knew it was too early. People have been asking me ever since, we're going to write a full book of transformations. And I knew that was way too early. Sort of a kicker there for people who want to get into it. But now in the last 5 years, I just realized the time is right. There's so much more people that are using the term. You think about the rise of coaching, for example, as a pure transformation industry. People are increasingly seeking help with the changes that they want to make. And you also start to see the commoditization of experiences like we did goods and services before. So that means it's really time to look at that next level of economic value, and that's that transformation.
So let's talk about the elephant in the room, and maybe soon for that. But the AI, right? And it's changing everything, and it's it's still in its diapers, I believe.
Right. It has yet to change that much, actually, but
right,
a lot.
The hype. Is that help, support, or too soon with transformation?
Well, there's definitely areas where it can support. So one is with the guiding. The economic function of transformation is guide, right? You deliver services, you stage experiences, you guide transformations. The customer is actually changing themselves, and you are helping them along that path in doing so. And so it turns out that AI is really pretty good at coaching, as long as it isn't too obsequious and take you down. But in the context of human coaching, human guiding. Right. If you have human guides, then AI can often fill in the spots in between that direct interaction with the human, whether it's physically or virtually, with tips, with inspiration, with continuing encouragement to make progress and so forth. The other place it is really good at is in customizing. And customizing is a core dynamic of this progression economic value. In fact, it's how I originally discovered it. My first book being Mass Customization. How do you efficiently serve customers uniquely, giving them exactly what they want at a price they're willing to pay? And I recognize that customizing a good automatically turned into a service. When asked, what does it turn a service into? I said, automatically turns it into an experience. And I went, wow, that sounds pretty good, right? Let me think about that. And I realized it's true that if you customize a service that's so appropriate for the particular person, exactly what they need at this moment in time, then you can't help but make them go, wow, and turn into a memorable event. That's what an experience is. So then in the same way, I asked myself, right, always thinking about what's next, comes from my strategy days at IBM way back when. I asked myself, what happens when you customize an experience? And I thought, well, if you design an experience that's so appropriate for a particular person, exactly what they need at this moment in time, then you can't help but turn to what we often call a life-changing experience, an experience that changes us in some way. And that's where the idea of transformation comes around. And then once you see that, then you see it everywhere as well, particularly, to use the old Ben Franklin phrase, any business that's in the business of helping people be healthy, wealthy, or wise is in the transformation business.
Wow. Hey, I'm listening to your book right now. I didn't get through it.
I was listening to the birds in your background right now.
Yeah.
Quite a great spot you got there.
Yeah, I take August off every year. And, I enjoy it. And, between me and you, I really don't take it off. It's kind of a sabbatical, but it's nice not dealing with the minutia. But so I'm listening to your voice every day. on a run or a ride or a flight, which is great. And and something I love that I wrote down that, you talk about memorable and meaningful experiences. Expound on that.
Yeah. So to be an economic offering, right? Because the word experience is very expansive. We can use it in lots of different ways. But to rise to the level of an economic offering, it has to become a memorable event, and it has to create a memory inside of us. You engage people inside of them and create that memory. But some experiences go beyond that to create meaningful experiences, right? That connect with who we are in some way, an identity. There's a sympathetic vibration that goes back and forth that says, yeah, this is about me. This provides me with meaning and becomes meaningful to me. And then I discovered that I've known that for a long time, but in the writing of the book, I discovered there's a third level, which is transporting experiences. Experiences take you out of who you are, such as give you awe, God's creation, like behind you, that get you into flow, that maybe give you some level of transcendence. All of those transport us. And then finally are the transformative experiences, those experiences that change us in some way. And sometimes it is a life-changing experience, right? That there's one thing that happens and it immediately changes who you are and what you want to do. I once gave a talk at the American Alliance of Museums, and there are about 300-400 people there, all in the museum business in some way. And I asked them how many were there in the museum business because of some experience they had as a kid in a museum. And about 40% of the hands raised up, right? So that's where we have those life-changing experiences. I did want to be Mantle and Gehrig and Ruth when I was growing up, but didn't have the chops for that. But some people do. They have that, and they decide to become a baseball player or whatever it is, and they work towards that, and many of them are able to achieve that. So the transformative experiences, though, are mostly where you bring a sequence of them, a series of them together. And again, that's where AI can help design them. What's the next thing that this person ought to be doing, handling regress as well as progress. So you're going up and to the right to be able to get to that summit of the aspiration achievement.
So let's share, some common examples of what that could look like in our day-to-day lives or in different industries. Obviously, you could easily think of a Disney that could be transformative, or I think you use Burning Man as an example in your book, but most of my listeners aren't, in those industries. So let's take us through some different industries of how and what we could do to look at, a hair salon to a consulting service, right? How can you look at from the lens of the transformation economy?
Well, let's start with the consulting service since it's easy, and then we'll get to the hair salon, right? Consulting services are down the plate transformation businesses. Nobody ever
should be anyway, right?
Right. They should. Well, exactly right. So a good way to think about it is that they should be, right? They putatively are, but so little do they actually consider it that way. But nobody no business hires a consultant unless they want some change in their business. Right. Otherwise, why would you do it? And so many consultants, they'll view that as, well, this is a time and materials thing. We're going to suck all this data out and we're going to put it in our black box and we're going to give you answers. And then, we're done and you're left to your own to actually implement those. Well, that doesn't create an effectual outcome that lasts through time. Right. You've got to be able to do that. So you need to think of your business as one as a transformation, is what is the actual aspiration that they want, and how do we go about designing that with them? Because again, like people, businesses only change from the inside out. You've got to change the organization. You got to change what they're doing to be able to effect that overall change in the business. So working with them directly, creating this series of experiences of letting them understand what's going on, what they need to change, and then help them make that change until it's happened is what they need to do. And ideally, charge for the change explicitly, which means charging for outcomes. Services is time and materials. You're charging for activities. Experiences is charging for time, the customer's time, admission fee, like going to Disney Park, membership fee as well, other ways of doing it. But you have to align what you charge for with what your customers value, and that is the achievement of that outcome. So you need to charge for the demonstrated outcome that your customers achieve. And so, for example, I remember in just January of this year, there was an interview with the managing partner, I think it is the title, global management partner of McKinsey and Company in the Harvard Business Review. And he said that we're increasingly creating projects where we charge for the outcome, right? Particularly around AI, because people don't know how they're going to use it. They don't know how it's going to work. And they're saying we can spend millions and millions of dollars and get nothing out of it. So we're going to charge for the outcome, which then puts the onus on McKinsey to do everything it takes to be able to do that. And OpenAI, the CFO, in a blog post said they're going to start charging for outcomes rather than just tokens that are pure inputs. And then in an editorial in the Wall Street Journal, the president of Dartmouth College, again, Healthy, Wealthy, Wise, said that we're going to start charging or start paying for outcomes with our students. If they don't get their aspirations met, then we'll give them some or all of their tuition back. And so that's a key point. So then in hair salons, right, your business, and by the way, Jim Gilmore and I to this day still talk about some of the things you do in your hair salon. So it's a great exemplar that we use. And I did some work actually with Hydrofacial. You familiar with them?
Yes.
Right. And so, and this is in the book where we looked at the dramatic structure of it, right? And in the experience economy, we talk about dramatic structure. It needs to rise up to a climax and comes back down again. And we had different frameworks. So the one we like the most is the 5 E's of enticing, entering, engaging, exiting, and extending, right? It's a great way to think about drama that rises up and comes back down and extends beyond the beginning and end of it. But there is, in fact, a 12-stage model. Sometimes there's different stages that people add into it called the hero's journey, right? I'm sure you've heard of the hero's journey.
Yeah.
And the thing about the hero's journey, it is automatic.
You have a whole chapter on that.
Yeah, it's the guts of a chapter. Yeah, there's a chapter where we take the core principles in the experience economy and bring forward, and that part is on dramatic structure, on understanding work is theater, and so working with Hydrofacials, working with them, and Eddie Yoon, great friend and colleague, one of the category pirates, was working with them, and he said something to this meeting that immediately hit me. He says, every super consumer, he wrote a book on super consumers, the one that not only buy a lot, but they're really emotionally involved in your products and tell other people and so forth. And he said, every super consumer is on a quest. And as soon as I heard the word quest, the hero's journey stuck to mind, right? Because you get this call to adventure and you go on a quest. So I worked out with them a way of thinking about the interaction with the esthetician or the skincare professional, right? Similar to hair salons, and so where it had 4 stages that you would go through, and you had the climax of is when they remove the Hydrofacial, removes the gunk out of your pores, right? And you get to see the gunk, and you get this spicy and tingly sort of feeling in your face, right? It's sort of the climax, the hero. You've now been transformed, at least for a time, right? It doesn't last forever as some others do, but you can become a Hydrofacial person and regularly schedule it so that you have this transformation. And you always peek at yourself in the mirror as you go out, seeing that. And then the going back into real life in the ordinary world of a hero's journey is getting that affirmation from others. So, you look beautiful. What did you do? And that sort of thing. So you're able to sort of structure around that whole thing. And I think that's the case with salons as well, is how can you make the customer the hero of their journey? How can you understand what journey they're on? The other thing about salons is like barber places, for many people, not everybody, they're third places. Right. There are people who go and hang out and want to talk. And I did a speech and a couple workshops at a third place summit in Rotterdam in January. And so these were cafes and surprisingly a lot of libraries were represented there and other businesses. And one of the things I realized is that a third place, you can think of it in transformation terms as a chrysalis. Right. Third place is neither home nor work. A chrysalis is neither caterpillar nor butterfly. Right. It's this liminal space and time. And we sort of represent that. Harvard came up with this as the book cover, where you've got this we now call it the chrysalis bird that's in the middle there. That's neither the swan nor the airplane. It's something in between. And I said, that's what third places need to be. Right. Salons need to be is recognize that every one of your clients in there is on their own transformation journey. And if you can provide them opportunity for them to reflect on that, maybe recharge them, maybe prepare them with what you're doing with the hair and the face and so forth, that puts them, it's like putting a costume on to go out on stage, like putting uniform on to go out and, be that hero. Is I think there's great opportunities for salons to be able to think in those terms, and at least with some of their customers, the regulars, the ones that like to talk and maybe even hang around, that you can provide those opportunities for them to think about their journeys, reflect on it, and send them out renewed, so to speak.
Yeah, and I know we're both, you can't be in the businesses that we're in without using the good and the bad of Starbucks as
Right.
case studies. Earlier this year at their leadership, summit in Vegas, I love what Howard Schultz said. He said, people are feeling the anxiety and uncertainty and the fragile nature of these times. The relevance around community, sense of humanity, the third place. People are longing for human connection. Take it personal. Understand your responsibility to every customer and partner. That's how we win, which I think echoes what you're talking about there.
Yep.
All right. So, whatever. Is there certain industries that transformation economy is an easier fit? If I'm an accountant, sell hot dogs down at, Main Street, where does it start and end?
Accountant's much easier because, again, let's go back to healthy, wealthy, and wise.
Yeah.
Right. Accountants are part of that wealthy. They help people track their money. They help people keep their money. They help people keep more of their money. They take a load off them in doing that. And one of the things I did in the book is expand those categories, right? To think about them more expansively. I call them the 4 spheres of transformation. It's not just
Say
about.
It again. I'm sorry, Joe.
Spheres, right?
Spheres.
I used the word sphere because I didn't want to use an industrial word like industry.
Yeah. Right.
They're
right. I like
they
that.
overlap, but it's not just about health. It's about health and well-being, right? Where health care is the means to which what we really want is well-being in our lives. And one of the harbingers of the transformation economy is how much we pay out of our own pocket for well-being things, including spas and salons and Tai Chi classes and mindfulness and all these other things. And then wealth is really about wealth and prosperity, right? Our money is a means to an end, right? The end is that we have prosperous lives, and that's what we're really looking for out of the money. And so, like an accountant, for example, if it could be a personal accountant or a business accountant, but the key is to ask why, right, about their business. Why, why do you want to hire an accountant? Well, I want to keep track of my money. Why do you want to keep track of my money? Because I want a better business. What kind of better business do you want? And get to a set of aspirations that you can help them achieve beyond the normal bookkeeping and et cetera that you do today. And then wise is about knowledge and wisdom, right? Knowledge is what we gain from experience and apply to the experience. Wisdom is the outcomes of that knowledge as it's applied in the world. And then, so educational institutions there, I mean, you think healthcare, finance, and education, I mean, huge sectors of the economy, and they're all transformation industries, or again, should be thinking of themselves as. And then there's one more, though, that Ben Franklin never thought about, and that's purpose and meaning. Right, which probably the most important one is that as human beings, we need meaning in our lives. And we increasingly look for that in ways that companies can help us gain that meaning, so gain something aligned with our purpose, along as how work gives us purpose and church gives us purpose and so forth. So as I think about, all of those, and what I say is that, they do overlap, sort of like an overlapping Venn diagram, but where they meet in the middle is in human flourishing. What they all are about is helping people flourish in their lives. And that's what business is about, right? That's the raison d'etre of businesses, to foster human flourishing. And all businesses do that, even if you're selling commodities, right? Because if I buy a commodity like organic produce, it's because I think the value of that is higher than the amount of money in my pocket. So I'm willing to pay for that. It's going to make my life better. But transformations do it most directly. Right? Because they change us again to become who we want to be, who we think we are going to flourish at a higher level.
And what brands are doing this already exceptionally well?
There's a number of companies one I'll point to is Calibrate. Right, you think in the fitness space generally, Noom does a great job. of doing that with its app. It's coaching. It does have an AI coach they call Welly that it uses as part of that, but your primary one is with a coach and with a cohort in that. Calibrate, interestingly, subsumes GLP-1s, Wegovy in its instance, into a total transformation offering. So they do this diagnosis up front that looks at not just your weight goals, but your emotional goals, your sleep goals, and other aspects of who you are, to then work with the GLP-1s to design a set of experiences, working with dietitians, working with other doctors, working with coaching, right? They have an app that goes along with it to help you get to the point where you're behaving differently. A lot of people, they take GLP-1s, but they don't really even think about behavior. They just think it's a magic pill. And to some degree it is. But if you want to lose, a friend of mine, I found out from a friend of mine who lost 150 pounds on it, right? So maybe a magic pill, she could have lost 50, but the rest of it is behavior change. Right. It's thinking differently about it. It's your relationship to food and other things that are going on in your life. It's not just that. I have another friend who's been taking GLP-1s for a long time and didn't do anything for him. He says, finally, I'm starting to lose 10 pounds. Right. But I see him at dinners and he's got like a full plate and 2 desserts and things. And so, he's not working on that behavior change. It can make all the difference. And Calibrate is one that does, in fact, charge for outcomes. That if you don't get down to your weight goal and sustain it, they actually call that part of their offering sustaining, that if you don't get down to your weight goal and sustain it, that they'll give 50% of your membership fees back. So that's a great way to do it. So that's a great example. I'll give you another interesting one that's rather different, but have you ever been to an Eataly?
No.
Eataly is, I think, the most vibrant retail experience in the world, and it's a grocery store.
How do you spell it?
Eataly. Brilliant name, right? It's an Italian grocery store.
Right.
Because of the name, I originally thought it was American because I first saw it in New York and then experienced it in Chicago. But it's a place, but it actually is Italian. It's a place where you go in and you might go shopping for groceries and all of a sudden see the cafe and want to spend your time over there. And maybe you're shopping further and all of a sudden you find out you're in line for a restaurant. They'll have 2, 3, 4 restaurants in the place. They sell the appliances. They even have an emission feed cooking school where you learn how to become an Italian chef. And the more better you transform into an Italian chef, of course, the more you're going to buy from Eataly. But fundamentally, the founder of the company, Oscar Farinetti, created it to actually expose people to the slowed food philosophy, wanting them to eat more organic, to slow down as they're eating, to not eat fast food, to eat well, and so forth. And so it's what a friend of mine, Bob Rogers, calls an invitational transformation, where you invite people in and to embrace what it is that you're doing, embrace everything about it, and then therefore invite you to change your life and become a slow food advocate as well.
Well, as you know, the GLP-1s are having an impact on the restaurant industry.
Right.
I think it was 500 something, filed bankruptcy this year. And, people are still eating, but, you have to make this is so cool. And what I'm thinking about, both listening to your book, The Transformation Economy, and having the discussion with you, is not only how it applies to the customer, client, patient, tenant, guest, whatever we may call them, but this also applies internally as a leader.
Yes.
Right. And I don't want to say more so, but like we have a mission, a mission statement for our employees that goes like this. And I've started 3 companies and it's the same for all 3 of them. We want you to make more money than you ever thought possible. However, we want the money you made to be the least valuable thing you got from working here. And
Beautiful.
That's kind of what you're talking about.
Yep.
And we say that on the interview and we say that on, throughout. We advertise that to our team members more to hold us accountable.
Right.
That
right.
Are you making more money than you did last year? And, are there opportunities? But really for this, just as much for the second part, are we providing you with the words and meaningful, transformation? We want you to, whenever your time is up in your career, to say that was one of the best decisions I made in my life because I'm a better spouse, I'm a better parent, I'm a better human being, yada, yada. So
better. Right?
Right.
Transform, transform, transform.
Yeah. So listening to you talk, it means as much as a leadership of what we should be doing with our team members as it does just with the external customer.
Yeah, yeah, and it applies both to fostering human flourishing. That if you want your customers to help you, or your employees help your customers flourish, we need to help them flourish as well. So they have the wherewithal to be able to do that. And you want people that have some drive, that have some intrinsic motivation, that have things that they want to do, even if they're not quite sure what it is, that they do gain from the employment beyond the money you make. So I love that dichotomy that you put there. I love the big however, right? You're going to make a lot of money, the more you did, but however, that's going to be beans compared to what you become as a human being. And if you could make that happen, you're a force for good in the will with every one of those employees. And yeah, maybe some of them become so good they're going to leave and go to greener pastures, but you should feel great success in whatever success they achieve outside of it. And you'll know you'll be able to bring somebody else in and be able to do the same with them.
100%. And they probably couldn't have gone on to greener pastures if it wasn't a part of their resume of what they got. I tell people, like, if you want your brand's reputation to not only attract great potential employees, but also detract the wrong fit.
Right. Right.
And so I say
exactly.
this, I say, picture, you have a niece or, a next door neighbor who has a 21-year-old daughter, and she's not the politest, never looks up from her phone, whatever, and you heard she was looking for a job, and you probably wouldn't say, hey, there's a Chick-fil-A right down the street. You'd be she wouldn't be perfect for Chick-fil-A. So you might, recommend some other places if you recommend it all. Now, let's have the opposite. Bubbly, personality, sweet, always looks at you in the eye, asks you how your day is going. You'd be like, you would crush it at Chick-fil-A, right? And it's kind of the same thing. I love this. So some things that we're going to have in our show notes is where you can get the Transformation Economy book, as well as we're going to have our show notes, your transformation toolkit. So talk to our listeners about that.
Yeah, if you really want to apply the principles to your book, right? This gives you the how-tos. It goes through a series of exercises it takes you through. You can write right in the book your answers to this, figure out how you can apply each one of the chapters in the book. Plus, the last one is actually in two chapters. Chapter 1 and the last chapter is where I talk about charging for outcomes. Right, that's key. And so introducing the first one and give you more how-tos in the last. So it's a great way to think about how to make this really happen in your businesses through that toolkit.
So I'm sure, the question I'm going to ask you right now is if I'm a listener, leader, and I want to, get in the transformational business, what are the first three things I should do? And let's caveat, get the book and get the toolkit. But where does someone start?
So there's a few places. Is one, you can start by ascending to the proposition that you're in the transformation business, right? Particularly those like, accountants that we talked about, consultants, healthcare, that view themselves as services business, when what people only ever buy from you if they want a transformation. So ascend to that proposition. Secondly is that, and many companies I'd say this is first, is come up with that meaningful purpose that really describes who you are. Why do you exist in business beyond making a buck, right? And that's what you just stated with your two-pronged approach about making more money than you thought possible. However, that's going to be the least of what you gain from this employment here. So that's your purpose. Find out what for your business, what's your purpose. Generally, it's not like coming out of thin air, right? Unless you're a startup. It is uncovering, like if you're the owner of it, is uncovering what got you into this business in the first place. What was your first love and why you're doing this? Again, beyond making a buck. And then making that statement sing. I often work with companies to come up with their purpose and then write a page and a half, 2-page of manifesto or a declaration about this is who we are that puts really some meat on the bones. So I encourage you to do that as well. And then lastly, particularly if you're an experienced stager, or you can easily turn your services into experiences, and the easiest way there is to embrace theater, right? That if you focus on how you and your people do what they do, then you'll be memorable, then you'll be engaging, then you'll create an experience. And there's one model in the book in chapter 4, I think it is, that's the model for what you do with experiences to make them transformative. And I call it encapsulation.
Is that from the chapter Shifting from Experiences to Transformations?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, good.
Right. So encapsulation is basically taking that experience and encapsulating it in 3 activities, which is preparation beforehand, reflection afterward, which I already talked about with the third places, and integration on an ongoing basis. That's the sustaining part, like Calibrate does with it. Even one single experience that if you just prepare people, help prime them for the experience, help them think about what's going on in their lives, help them think about the possibilities of change and what they're doing, then have the experience and then have them immediately reflect on it, right? That will retroactively increase the value of that experience with them, even if they don't change. But if you get them to think about, hey, what were the highlights of the experience? What really made an impact on me? Does this affect me in any way? Is there a way I might be able to take what I learned here, what I did here, maybe what I became here, and move it into the future and focus on it as an aspiration? And then integration helps continuing to work with them to then make that happen, right? If you do that alone, you'll put yourself into the transformation business.
I love this, Joe. One of the things I think was a silver lining of the pandemic was that I feel generally businesses, because we've had an economic boom since 2009, 2010, right? And so when the busy bus pulls up, if you go to the hair salon, right, the least experienced hairdresser is going to be busy from Thanksgiving to Christmas, right? No fault of her own. But, and then that's kind of what happened with the business, where you could take the eye off the ball and not be doing the right things. And when I felt that, the silver linings of the pandemic was the purpose motive that came back, that, we had to tie employees' jobs to the purpose and the transformation that had. And I think that's what this is doing. I think, when you build a transformation business, obviously not only are you going to get the retention, the re-sign, the earned sales growth, the referrals, lifetime, all those things. Yes. But you're giving, team members and companies meaningful purposes to get out of bed and to have a reason for this. And I think it's perfect. I think it's so needed, instead of just a transaction and selling something that costs you $1 for $2, right? So this has been awesome, Joe. I thank you. You've provided meaning to me without necessarily knowing it. Not only was I able to take the things you've taught the past 3-4 decades into, building my businesses, but it's also been a career for me that I had no idea, was going to be a career in helping businesses, make their competitive advantage on the customer experience. So, you've always been kind and generous from afar and anytime I've reached out to you. So, Joe, I can't thank you enough.
All right. Thanks, John. It's been a pleasure to talk with you today.
All right, Revolutionaries, we just wrapped it up with author and consultant Joe Pine and his book, The Transformation Economy, Guiding Customers Achieve Their Aspirations, which shows the greatest economic value lies in helping customers become who they want to be. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next week on the Customer Service Revolution podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Customer Service Revolution podcast with John DiJulius. Did you enjoy this episode? Consider leaving us a review. We value your feedback and love to hear how you're using the podcast in your organization. To hear more, be sure to subscribe now on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for being part of the Customer Service Revolution.